Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kelnick.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100, every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to the morning podcast that gives you everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes. We've got the fire going, it's cold out there, but most importantly, congratulations to Kemi Badenoch on making it to 100 days as Conservative leader.
It probably felt a lot longer on the inside. Kemi Badenoch's given a big interview to mark the milestone, and more on that in just a moment. It's Monday, February the 10th, 2025. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico. With me, Sam Coates of Sky News. Who wants to start with something specific? Sam, I think you've got something looking at a front page with an iconic image of Keir Starmer, head in hands. Not usually the kind of image that Prime Ministers want to get onto the front page of the papers, so you can tell us the story behind it.
Talking to people around Keir Starmer and people who work with him, there's always been a lot of neuralgia about how much to push the idea that he really is this massive football fan who plays once a week with his oldest friends, how much to put those matches in the public domain, whether or not it helps his image. And so I'm always fascinated whenever pictures of him emerge with his friends playing on a Sunday afternoon. And yesterday, some of them popped up, but they weren't the most flattering of photos. And one of those is on the front page of the Times, head in hands, having just missed a penalty. The captions write themselves. Another missed target for the Prime Minister was what the Times said. And I just wondered, given Downing Street's neuralgia about all of this, how do these pictures actually emerge? Because you see them, we've had them, I think 3 times now across 2024 and this year, always by the same photographer. It's a guy called Jeremy Selwyn. So I endeavoured to find out, does Jeremy Selwyn get a tip-off from Downing Street at the point when perhaps they want the pictures out or not? And if so, why? So I asked him, and it's interesting just the lengths that it turns out this guy goes to get the pictures. He says, nobody ever tips me off. I try and work out which weekends the Prime Minister does and doesn't have meetings and whether or not Arsenal are playing at home. And so it's potluck, and often he draws a blank and goes and the Prime Minister's not there. So I don't get any help at all, and certainly don't work for the government or for Labour. This is the guy, incidentally, who did the absolutely iconic picture of Ed Miliband eating a bacon sandwich, and you can say that was or it wasn't an important moment, but it was certainly one of the most discussed pictures of my political journalistic career. But I thought I'd just mention all of this as a shout out, and a shout out to all of the photographers and cameramen who work in Westminster, because not almost all, but so much of the imagery that we see of politics these days are from what I would call vanity photographers and vanity filmographers. And they are images carefully selected to make people look good, make politicians, make sure you only see a certain side of politicians. So it's very nice to see Keir Starmer with that slight paunch, and I speak as somebody who also at the moment has a slight paunch, but the real him staring out from the front pages. So hurrah for Jeremy and the like. You don't see as much of this kind of stuff as perhaps I'd like. Anyway, that's the story behind today's front page photographs. And do you want to kick off the week ahead?
Yes, on the even more serious stuff, the government wants to talk about immigration to coincide with the second reading of the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill. From 1 o'clock, a Save British Farming campaign demonstration will be encouraging farmers to bring tractors to Westminster. Nigel Farage will be trying to be the face of this protest. He's also doing a farm visit in North London and delivering a speech. It's all about farms these days. Labour's Chief Whip will be speaking to a second Labour MP wrapped up in that WhatsApp comments furore on Saturday night. Andrew Gwynn was sacked as Health Minister and suspended from the Whip, and now a new intake MP, 29-year-old Oliver Ryan, is in the firing line for his comments too. The comedian Matt Ford interviews Chancellor Rachel Reeves in front of an audience in London.
What could possibly go wrong? Right, tomorrow, Tuesday, Sue Gray is introduced in the House of Lords. She finally becomes a peer. There's televised line-by-line scrutiny of the assisted dying bill, probably more like streamed online rather than an entire television channel, but we'll showing it, but we'll see. And today isn't the only Tory milestone this week. Margaret Thatcher became Conservative leader 50 years ago today.
And on Wednesday, PMQs, the shiny floor show of politics, and Rachel Reeves will be seeing major bankers in a bid to boost growth and perhaps also to share more of her thinking on deregulation of the city and how she thinks that can help them.
Thursday is GDP for the last quarter of last year, and Commons rises for half term, as do we.
And Friday, Saturday is the Munich Security Conference with JD Vance, no less, in attendance, and me, as it turns out, with my shiny lanyard. Everyone will be looking to the impact of that on policy on Ukraine from the Trump administration.
But let's start with the first big topic that we want to talk about today, and that's the breaking news overnight, which is President Trump has announced 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports into America, and they're all coming soon. Right, now, frustratingly for everybody involved, there's very little detail about exactly how this is going to work, whether it's absolutely universal, whether there are carve-outs, and that's because it was all said by President Trump on Air Force One as he was on his way to the Super Bowl, and there simply isn't much more detail about it, leaving diplomats everywhere scrambling. Now, this matters because 10% of UK steel, and UK steel is a pretty beleaguered industry, 10% of UK steel is exported to the US. And, you know, the politics of this are also fairly clear. Trump might just have made a bit of a mockery of the gentle ministerial gloating about the UK being in a better position than other countries when it comes to tariffs. But if I'm being honest, and we don't know that for sure because we just simply don't have the details, all of which is a big headache for Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, his first week in the job. And what do you think the significance of this is?
Well, the only thing I would add there, Sam, is that steel takes up an inordinate amount of bandwidth at the Department of Trade, and beyond that, it's become symbolic of stopping British industrial decline. So 10% is practically difficult, but symbolically, I'd suggest, even more difficult. And Labour said in opposition that Tories were not doing enough to protect the UK steel industry. So I think that it all comes down to saying if it is really substantial, it's going to be a headache for the government on how to handle it.
It's just really difficult to know what will happen at this stage because there are just so few details available.
That's true, but if you look at the playbook from Politico this morning, you'll see a reminder that actually there is a plan ready to go in this kind of eventuality to slap reverse tariffs on US goods, Harley Davidson motorcycles, Levi's jeans, etc. So it is possible to do that, but that would be a complete reset of the tone, wouldn't it? Away from this Peter Mandelson kind of schmoozathon.
Whereas the actual direction that Britain seems to take in relation to the US seems to be, as you say, going in the other direction. There is a link, and the link is really important. There's a link story on the front page of the Telegraph about whether or not this government now will have to water down the online harms bill, which is something that massively annoys US tech companies. It proposes fines if they don't take down harmful but not illegal content. Now, of course, Donald Trump has ended up importing tech bros into the heart of his administration. You saw all of them lined up at his inauguration a couple of weeks ago. It's possibly the most effective lobbying effort I've ever seen in history by one particular sector to co-opt the US president on your side in order to get your regulatory wishes and demands listened to on the global stage. But it appears to be working. The Telegraph suggests that ministers might be open to changing the online harms bill in a way that effectively means that it's no longer such a threat, and that could pave the way for a trade deal. Let's see how ministers respond to that through the day. I wouldn't be surprised if the government feels the need to point blank deny they're doing it because it's what Donald Trump wants, and they don't want to look like they're bending to the wishes of an overseas power for very obvious political reasons, but end up doing this anyway for exactly that reason.
And it's 100 days of Kemi Badenoch's leadership today. What's that going to look like? Celebrations or frowns?
Interestingly, in a microcosm of everything that Kemi Badenoch has to deal with, it might look like Nigel Farage being the face of that farming protest. and Kemi Badenoch actually struggling slightly to find a way of inserting herself into the public conversation, given that there's so much else going on. But I thought it was just important to stop and reflect on this important moment, because a lot of people are. She's given an interview that we'll talk about in a second, but a lot of Tory MPs are talking about her as well. I went overnight and messaged a few of them. So these are the verdicts of 3 of the 121 Tory MPs that were left after the rout last year. And so, like it or not, and they were selected by me completely at random, here is what she is confronting from her own party. So I asked one of them, who's an ex-cabinet minister, what they thought, and they simply said, and I think they meant this in quite an acid way, as expected. Another one said, and this was a sort of longer, more thoughtful, but still critical response. They said, look, I'd say she has to do much better because, largely because of reform, the time that she has to settle down is much shorter than Starmer had when he was in opposition. There are grumblings about already, and so a lot of people will be watching her next 100 days. We need a credible alternative proposition on the economy. She hasn't got 2 years to come up with policy, especially as characters like Robert Jenrick aren't being very subtle about their ambitions. And then the third and final contribution, I actually wavered whether to read out at all, because it was simply an ad hominem attack. But the theme of it is, look, she's just not very good. She's very unlikely to lead us into the next election. Like it or not, that is, 3 of the 3 people I sampled on a Sunday evening. And so it is fair to say the Conservative Party is restive. And how do you think she's doing?
Well, the first thing I'm thinking is it should be ad feminam if I've got my Latin case right. Man, you occasionally get to do this to Coates, right? No, someone's bound to get in touch and say I've got it wrong. And also that you managed to get hold of 4% of Tory MPs overnight on a Sunday. Well done, you. But I think what she's trying to say here in this podcast, trigonometry, it's with Konstantin Kisin, so a star of the new writing in podcasting, interesting, pitching it there with listeners who will be listing a bit towards reform, but also younger listeners, I think, crucially. She does say, I've got to take the party with me. It sounds like she has heard some of those noises off and grumblings in her own ranks that she is too much distant from the party, too critical, etc. The punchy negative message, vote reform, you'll just get more Labour. And she says on ECHR, it's interesting, on that call to leave the European Court of Human Rights, other countries can basically make changes that they need to make on immigration and asylum without leaving ECHR. So she is standing her ground on that one. And then she talks about integration, which you can see is a big theme for her, saying we shouldn't let people in who've no interest in integrating. It'd be interesting how she argues how she would go about that before they actually get into the country. A lot of stuff on youth disaffection as well, climate change, student debt. So basically targeting voters underneath the Tory median age, which, well, even younger than that.
It's interesting that she's gone for choosing to record a 75-minute podcast on a sort of centre-right podcast platform as one way of marking 100 days. There'll be another podcast that she's doing with The Telegraph that will drop at 5 o'clock today. And this is how she's trying to get her message out. If you were to distill some of the more thoughtful criticism about her from inside the Conservative Party, it's kind of the worry that she is more head of a Tory-leaning think tank than head of a political party. The kind of punchy stuff, the dividing lines are not coming hard and quick enough. And as a consequence, really, the Conservative Party have been drowned out by the thing that's obsessing everybody in Westminster at the moment, which is Reform UK. There was an ever so slight hostage to fortune in the trigonometry interview, which I've heard about the first half an hour of in the early hours of this morning. And she said, and she was talking in the context of Labour, but I rather think you could see the read across of her. She said, "What you vote for, you deserve." And I think what a lot of people voted for when they chose her as Tory leader is somebody who had this kind of unique ability to use language and attract attention. But I think the criticism is she's just not attracting enough attention as things as time progresses. She leans too much towards reviews and thinking things through, and that's best really encapsulated by what she says about the European Convention of Human Rights. It's maybe we'll leave, but maybe we won't. Other countries can manage without leaving the ECHR to manage their borders. She points to Australia, but at the same time, maybe we'll have to in time. I think Tory MPs find nuanced kicking into the long grass of decisions quite hard to deal with. It's quite a hard sell on the doorstep, and they are worried that time is running out. But I suppose the big question, Anne, is does politics have to be conducted like this in the face of a threat from the right? Because bluntly, that is exactly what's happening in Germany. They're in the middle of a general election fight. We've got a centre-right party, but having to dance to a tune, potentially, of a further right party, all played out on German TV last night. What lessons for Kemi Badenoch does the TV debate between the two German frontrunners for the chancellorship have for Kemi Badenoch?
So it's just under 2 weeks to the election in Germany, Sam. And yes, I watched that debate last night. It's a format viewers absolutely love in Germany, the TV duel between the two realistic candidates to lead the country. So it's Olaf Scholz, the present chancellor, and Friedrich Merz for the Christian Democrats. And the moment of ignition was really over immigration, and in particular, a very sour backdrop at the moment in Germany in response to a fatal knife attack. With an asylum seeker arrested. In the wake of that, Friedrich Merz then came under pressure when he attempted to pass a border policy vote in the Bundestag for the first time for a mainstream party with votes from the AfD, so from that far-right party, which is also described as such officially in Germany. And breaching the firewall, well, that was a big clash. And Olaf Scholz said it was a major mistake. It had let Germany down. But Sam, it's absolutely, as you indicated, one way or the other, the parties of the trad right of centre are having their electoral agenda set by the further right. And in Britain, it's Reform. And in Germany, it is the much further right, AfD. But either way, these are the questions they're having to answer. And you feel that Kemi Badenoch probably can't dodge that forever.
And it does feel like the likely successful political strategy for the person who's going to win the German chancellorship will have been to sort of to shift their rhetoric and their policy agenda to the right in response to this threat. And there is no sort of grand coalition of voters anymore. The only response is to allow yourself to move rightwards. Is that the lesson, Anne?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a coalition to be done in Germany, right? There's any number of colours of coalitions that you can do when you see the numbers that come out. But broadly speaking, if you are the Christian Democrats, you do need to scoop up some AfD votes to solidify. Otherwise you end up in one of those awful, as they would see it, grand coalitions where you're kind of tied. They call it an elephant coalition to someone else. And I think that's what Friedrich Merz has been trying to do, but he did kind of fail. When that happened in Parliament, there really was a lot of blowback to it. So he really had to say, well, I tried to do this because I thought it was in the country's interest. It didn't quite work out, but you can still trust me to take on board the concerns of the AfD, but I won't work with the AfD. So it did get into a bit of a muddle.
All of that has left us basically no time to talk about the government's preferred topic of the day, which is immigration. So thank goodness they spent 3 days pitch rolling about that. If you want to know why they're doing it, read Katie Bull's column in The Eye over the weekend, which explains that red wall Labour MPs are putting pressure on Keir Starmer to up the salience of that issue. But that's it for us, because there's been so much else going on. I'll be back tomorrow with you, and look forward to it then.
See you then.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.